Minister. Minister, I have a couple of questions I'd like to raise myself, if that's okay. Just the first one is in relation to the vote itself in terms of administration. And the cost of administration has increased by 21 million, which is a 4% increase. And I presume you're going to come back and say to me, well, the reason for that is the additional administration that has been involved this year and the additional demands. And I understand that, but can you explain to me the justification for a 7% increase in the administration of the Social Insurance Fund, which has gone up by 16 million euro? So across the department, the administration has gone up by 21 million euro, and we have a substantial amount of additional money being spent, additional workload involved in it. But why is there such a dramatic jump in the administration of the Social Insurance Fund mid-year, over and above what was profiled at the start of the year? So if you could provide me an explanation in relation to that. Secondly, Minister, I want to pick up on something you said in your opening statement, and that is that in your conclusion you said that I strongly believe in the fullness of time we will look back on the swift and effective delivery of the pandemic unemployment payment as one of the single most important actions to ensure that with social solidarity in Ireland during a dark period in our country. I'd question that comment, Minister, because to me, I think the most effective scheme that was run was the employment wage subsidy scheme. And if you look at the costings of the employment wage subsidy scheme over the first 2 years of that scheme, in terms of direct costs and the PRSI forgone from the state, that cost on average 102 euros a week to the Exchequer, whereas the pandemic unemployment payment was multiples of that. And we have all come across cases, every single one of us, where people have done exceptionally well out of the pandemic unemployment payment. And the reason that I raised this with you is that I was probably the lone voice at the time when this was being introduced, arguing that we should have expanded and enhanced the employment wage subsidy scheme rather than going down the road of the pandemic unemployment payment. And I just want to flag that particular issue with you. Just on a more practical level, Minister, one issue I want to bring up with you, and this is in terms of the additional needs payments, and I've listened intently to what you've said earlier, and I've come across a particular case recently, and this is just reflects the anecdotal evidence that I've been hearing from constituents, from some staff within the Department of Social Protection, that there are barriers being put up, false barriers being put up to actually facilitating the processing of these applications. And I give you one practical example. A constituent of mine who is visually impaired, who had been in receipt of the blind pension until she reached pension age. She needed additional money for heating in her home. So she needed an additional need payment. We sent her out the SWA1 form, which was the form that we were told that we should send out to be filled out. And she submitted that form. And it took a lot of effort for her to try and get the documentation put in with it. As I say, she is someone that was, prior to reaching retirement age, in receipt of the blind pension, so you can understand the difficulties involved in that. And then she receives an additional needs payment application form out. And a further set of 3 pages of a form that she has to fill out, asking the exact same questions again. Now, funny enough, I've gone back to the department looking for a copy of this form because it does lay out much clearer than the SWA what's needed. I can't get it. Now, this woman was very irate with me that she filled out the form that I'd advised her, the form that I'd been advised by the department to fill out, and then she gets another form in the post to fill out, asking the exact same questions, looking for the exact same documentation again, and this woman is certified as blind. And I think, you know, this is the type of thing that's happening. Either it's a case that there is no one looking at the forms and just issuing these standard replies out, or there's a deliberate attempt to try and delay processing these applications, one or the other, and neither is good, Minister. So it is an issue that does need to be addressed. Minister, if I can turn to an issue that I've raised with you before, and that's the issue of long COVID. And the only statistics we have in this country in terms of long COVID are the ones that your department have provided to me in terms of people that were on enhanced illness benefit for COVID-19 that subsequently went on to an illness benefit payment or a disability allowance payment. And I welcome the assistance your department has provided in relation to that. Now we have over 5,500 people who claimed enhanced illness benefit from the initial onset of the illness for at least 10 weeks. Over 4,000 of those went on to claim a payment for at least 2 weeks after that. My question to you is, Minister, and you might come back to the committee on it, can you provide statistics in relation to that cohort of people who have been on illness benefit or disability allowance for, 2 to 3 months subsequent to the original claim? Because I think it would be useful to have more detailed information in terms of people's recovery from long COVID, and the only statistics that are available are within your department. And if you could facilitate that, I'd appreciate it. Just the final question then I have for the Irish thought. And can I say, Minister, first of all, that I welcome the changes that have been made in terms of the means test regarding the fuel allowance. This is something we've discussed in the past, and it is a very positive and very welcome development, and I think will help to deal with some of the financial hardship that we're all experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And with that in mind, I want to turn to the Irish thought, and that's in relation to the costs of energy bills. And what's happening at the moment in terms of the Department of Social Protection is a sticking plaster, and it's a very welcome sticking plaster, but a sticking plaster nonetheless. And the only long-term way to substantially deal with the issue of energy poverty in this country is the retrofitting of homes. Now, as you know, Project Ireland 2040 committed to retrofit 45,000 homes a year, and Minister, yourself and myself were around the table when we signed off on that. The target for this year is just 22,000 homes, of which just 4,500 are people who fall under the energy poverty category. The target for next year is 37,000 homes. And yet at the same time, we have over 9,500 people in fuel poverty who are now waiting 2.5 years to access the retrofitting programme under the Warmer Home Scheme. Now, Minister, my question to you is, we have 2,900 participants on the Rural Social Scheme. They're mainly involved in seasonal work during the summer months, and normally that winds down during the winter months. And I've put this question to the Taoiseach, and I'm putting it to you now in terms of your review. Would it not make sense in the short term to redeploy those 2,900 staff? And I know that the managers of the schemes around the country will be willing to facilitate this, and redeploy them into doing emergency measures to install attic insulation, attic door covers and lagging jackets in the homes of people in fuel poverty around this country at the moment. Those three measures alone would have a dramatic impact on the fuel consumption and energy consumption in homes across this country, and would have a big impact in terms of people that are in fuel poverty. And could I ask you, even at this late stage, to consider such a measure? Thank you.
I might pick up that last question first. I think the Deputy makes a good point, and I would like to see more investment and faster movement on the Warmer Home Scheme in particular. And there is training going on the apprenticeship side of things in Minister Harris's department as well. I do know also that there are several ETBs. In fact, I think there's 5 ETBs that are specialising in retrofitting training as well. I do also know that some CE participants, as part of their programme and as part of their education and training, they have been doing courses in this area. RSS is different. There isn't a training element to RSS, but as you all know yourselves, RSS participants are multi-skilled, so it wouldn't be a huge leap for them, I think, to be involved in the retrofitting side of things. I suppose the difficulty is matching up the contractors with the participants, but look, we'll take your idea away. I think in principle it's a sound one. How do we do that in practice now? I'm not sure, but I do know CE people are moving into the space and have been getting employment in this space as well, because I suppose the big constraint isn't necessarily funding, as is the case with a lot of things at the moment. It's the people and the people with skills to do it. But I think it's worth exploring further how we can marry them two things together.
Yeah, and look, Minister, I accept, you know, in terms of retrofitting, there is a skills deficit there, and that has to be met. But like what I'm talking about is low skill stuff. Rolling out insulation in an attic, putting a lagging jacket on a copper cylinder. You know, they're pretty basic things, but they could have a dramatic impact this winter in terms of energy consumption in homes. And we have the staff there. And in fairness, they are staff that are willing to work and do, the participants are willing to do this work. The supervisors are willing to work with them. And every home that we carry out that very minimal level of retrofitting to, and I accept it's a minimal level of retrofitting, but will have a dramatic impact in terms of fuel consumption, because they are the low-hanging fruit in relation to it. And we shouldn't be, you know, waiting and waiting and waiting for the gold-plated solution when we can take small steps today to make a real difference. Yeah. So I'll leave that with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Minister.
Thanks, Cahirlock. And just in terms of the administration overspend, it's 11.5 million on pay, and the cost, that's to cover the costs of increases for 2022 due under the Building Momentum Public Service Agreement. And there's also been an increase in the use of overtime to meet the additional demands on the Department's Community Welfare Service arising from the cost of living crisis, to respond to the Ukrainian crisis, to deal with very significant volumes of work, including PPSNs, public service cards and safe registrations for same. Then in relation to the administration overspend, the primary reason for the overspend relates to an overspend of 20 million on the medical certs, which had primarily been offset by the underspend of 9 million on the IT external service provision under the A2.5 office equipment and external IT services subheads. So just we've seen a huge increase in the medical certificate submissions for 2022, and that can be attributed to surges in illness benefit cases due to Omicron and other variants of COVID-19. From April 2022, certificates were also required for COVID, where previously HSE evidence had been accepted, which led to a further increase in submissions, and it's expected that seasonal illnesses such as flu, in addition to COVID-19, will lead to further increases for the remainder of the year. So that's...
So just clarify, the 16.8 million euro in additional cost on the social insurance fund, the bulk of that is made up in terms of medical certificates for COVID-19.
Yeah. There's a lot of that made up of that.
A lot of money, Minister.
Yeah. I'm right on that, yeah. I might just come back to you on the administration expenses on the SIF are apportioned between the vote and the SIF schemes, and PUP is a SIF scheme, but the numbers on the scheme were much higher than envisaged in the original estimate, and it's also much higher numbers on the COVID illness benefit. So that's part of the reason why there was an overspend there, but on the administration side there. Am I making sense to you?
No, it's not.
I'm not making sense. Yeah, which subhead are you referring to?
Under the social insurance fund, there's a 16 million euro variance, an increase on administration under the social insurance fund. It's on page 5 of the supplementary documentation that you provided. It's the first subhead under social insurance fund. 7% increase. And while I accept there's a 4% increase in terms of administration costs across the department, and I accept there's additional demands, I just can't understand why there's a 7% in relation to the Social Insurance Fund. Now, I think what you're saying in evidence here is that's because of the additional medical certificates associated with COVID-19.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the PUP, because some of the PUP payments were out of the SIF, so there was an increased administration there in terms of that as well. They were much higher than we thought they'd be in the original, because the PUP was paid for much longer than because of obviously the pandemic or the new variant at the time.
Yeah.
So I think those are the reasons. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And just, I know you mentioned you mentioned also about the PUP, and in my initial speaking, well, of course it's not just the PUP, it's the EWIS, it's all the other supports. You're right there. But I think it's fair to say a lot of people, I came under a lot of pressure at the time that people weren't going to work because we're getting the PUP. But the truth is, when the jobs were available and the economy opened up again, people did go back. They went straight back, and we're at the lowest unemployment figures we've had in a long, long time, and there's more people working than ever before. And I know there was concerns out there, and I did speak to people and they said we can't get them because they're on the PUP. But the truth is, when the jobs came and the economy opened up, they went off it very, very quickly. To be fair, now to most people want to work, I suppose that's it. Just to say about the additional needs payment, look. You mentioned there about getting one form and then having to fill in another form. Look, I don't want to hear that. That shouldn't be happening. That's the truth. It shouldn't, and it's disappointing. There's no deliberate attempt, I believe, to not to give people their payments. We did an extensive campaign on the radio telling people what they're entitled to. This is the state's safety net to support people who find themselves in very, very difficult circumstances. And I can only say, to get 2 sets of forms out for a blind person, well, it's hard to understand it. So if you want to give me the specific details, I'm happy to follow that up, because that shouldn't be happening. That's the truth. So I get them.
And look, Minister, I accept at a Oireachtas level, I think across the board, we all know what we want to do here. But I think it's important that delivery is reflected on the ground.
It should be.
The feedback we're getting is quite mixed in relation to it at the moment.
Yeah,
and this is something the committee is monitoring quite closely.
Yeah, and I'm aware of it too, and we want to try and iron out any difficulties in the system. There's no doubt about that. And just in terms of the long COVID statistics, we'll get those for you.
Thank you.
I think that's it. I think I've answered the questions. Thank you.